right, so we're here with Dan Oakes, and we're talking about how social media and how cell phone use affects adolescents. And Dan, we thought we could ask you about how adolescents are affected by social media and cell phone when it comes to sexuality.
Well, I think there's a lot of ways, of course, but I think one of the earliest developmental effects digital media has on kids is when they start texting really young. What happens is they're starting to experience what I call an always-on relationship. So kids today, a 14-year-old will get up in the morning and they'll text 75 people, "What's up?" And they're just gleaning who can respond, right? And they stay in this always-on connected place all day long, but it's with people that are disembodied because it's just text. And so before they even know how to emotionally regulate themselves well, because at 14 we certainly don't know how to do that very well,
right.
We're into this always-on relationship. And parents don't really realize this when they give their kids a cell phone. Texting seems like a harmless thing, and it is for the most part. But it starts a new social development that means I have to regulate very, very quickly with lots of other stimulus and other people. And most parents regulate that well and teach their kids and train their kids, but once they don't pay attention, the kids really get lost in this always-on relationship. And the truth is, we don't really experience that until later in life. You know, you get married and you kind of have this always-on relationship, a relationship you always think about and talk to each other, and you're always pinging things off of each other. And that's a very mature thing to do, is to have that always-on relationship.
What negative effects would that have on an adolescent then if they're in this always-on relationship?
Well, I think the biggest part is it means that they can't emotionally regulate. If nobody responds, what do they feel immediately at 14? I mean, I'm an adult man, and if my wife doesn't respond to me, I feel that a little bit,
Rejection,
like, hey, what's up? But if I'm a 14-year-old and I text 10 people and I get no response, well, I'm going to feel really crappy about myself. I'm going to worry. I'm going to excessively feel needy. And so they just don't have the emotional readiness for always on. You know, I think most parents will limit their kids. They will have, you can text these 2 or 3 friends and bring your phone down at night, and they put some healthy limitations on it. But it really can create a lot of insecurity, and that insecurity at that age is really what creates havoc, you know.
So you have clients that fit that mold?
Well, for sure, absolutely. The hard part is it's a springboard then for compulsive behavior. I have to text over and over and over, or if I have to look for satisfaction in other places, or I'm looking for a greater stimulus.
Yeah.
What's next?
So what starts as kind of a stimulus, a response, over time, my brain is looking for something, and the immediate gratification is got to be part of it, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
That stimulus becomes what, for example, over time?
Well, it becomes how we emotionally regulate. I have to soothe myself by getting lots of stimulus. So Philip Zimbardo out of Stanford talks about this arousal addiction that's being developed. And it's old addictions were, like if I'm a heroin addict, I want more of the same. I want the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
But arousal addiction is, I need new and different. I need new stimulus. I'm going to go from a video game to texting to pornography, back to the video game, and I'm going to play a different video game, and I'm going to play that level, and I get bored of that level, so I move to the next level, and then I'm going to text these three friends, and then I'm going to go eat something, and then I'm going to come back and look at pornography. And so this arousal addiction is this generalized sense of I need more and more.
Yeah, they're in a constant state of elevated stimulus.
Absolutely.
I recognize that as when my oldest was probably 12 or 13, and this was a couple of years ago, but we went on a family vacation, and we went to Yellowstone, and then we went down through Colorado, and we went through, Mesa Grande, not Mesa Grande, what's it called? Mesa Verde, the big, castle in the cliffside. And I'm thinking, my 12-year-old's gonna love this. This is the coolest thing ever. And I can't express my disappointment that he was so bored. He's like, Dad, can we turn on the Xbox? It was in the car. We brought the video game system with us. And all he wanted to do was play video games. He didn't want to go out and see these really cool places. And it occurred to me, real life is really boring to this kid because he's been saving the universe since he was 6 years old.
Absolutely. It's a lot harder to appreciate a sunset when you've been watching a conqueror establish dominance over a village 200 times in a video game.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, what's a sunset? Who cares?
Yeah.
What is pornography doing to the adolescent brain?
Well, it's doing exactly what we've described. It's just doing it to sexuality. I mean, to be kind of direct, healthy sexuality moves slowly, right? Healthy sexuality requires a relationship development. It requires a paced, gauged response based on my partner's response. It's about emotion and love. And this digitized sense of sexuality is about how many tabs can I have open, how many images can I see at once, how fast can I get to an orgasm, and I'm done with this and then on to the next, right? And so it's providing, and it's not so much about nudity. I mean, everybody thinks the real problem with pornography is nudity. It's really not the issue. The issue is the novelty. We're back to that.
Yeah.
It's that I can see 300 nude images in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
So, this idea, there's an organic sense to nudity, that there's nothing inherently wrong or shameful about that, right? Especially in a loving relationship. But it's the overstimulation of that.
So there's sort of this overarching idea in society that, demonizing pornography is a moralistic thing. And I don't mean to downplay the moralistic side of it, because that's valuable to a lot of people. But what you're saying, it sounds like, is it's not really just a moralistic thing. There's something physiologically going on here, in addition to maybe the spiritual or moral or whatever stuff that you might want to talk about.
Absolutely, and the research is really present. There's debate about that research in the field a little bit, but it really comes from socialistic types. But the brain scientists, there's no debate for them.
Yeah.
They see the brain change, they understand, and they see the differences.
There's clinical studies that show the brain chemistry is changing under these conditions.
Yeah, and that's
hyperstimulation.
Right, and that hyperstimulation is really a key factor, because the exaggeration of what they see digitally is so beyond what's real. There was a researcher in the 70s named Nico Tinbergen that did studies with animals, and he was trying to measure what attracted them. And the famous study is he put these butterflies in a cage and he made a fake female, but he made it twice as big and twice as bright, but he did put the exact pattern of the female on the fake butterfly, and he puts it in the enclosure, and all the males flock to it and are stuck to it. And who do they ignore? Right? They ignore
the real females.
The real females, right? So porn is like this. Porn is a super normal stimulant. The women and men in it, the people in it, are exaggerated versions of what humans look like.
Most of us look like, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so our brain is attuned to those shapes and forms, but then when we get that shape and form in an exaggerated way, and you get it 300 times a minute, then it produces excessive dopamine, which is exactly what's at the beginning of all addictions.
Yeah.
Is excessive dopamine.
And so I kind of see where this is going down the road. If you've been conditioned to respond to this superhuman, then in real life, again, it's kind of like the video game thing. Real life's boring compared to
absolutely.
There's no beauty in a sunset if you've conquered the world 300 times.
This is an epidemic. I have to tell you, in my private practice, from couples who first get married, when the boy has an extensive, or the young man has an extensive history of pornography, it's shocking to him how quickly he is unable to be aroused to his normal real wife.
So he can't have a real intimate relationship with one person because it's just a sunset.
Right, and where does it leave her? It leaves her in a place where she feels undesired or not wanted, and she thinks, well, what's wrong with me? And it takes them time to work that out, for him to recognize that's even the issue.
Yeah.
Right. Not to mention people who are later in years and have been in pornography their whole life. I mean, they're experiencing erectile dysfunction, porn-induced erectile dysfunction, earlier than we've ever seen in the history of mankind.
You can't get aroused at the sunset,
right?
The normal beauty, because you're so accustomed to this hyperstimulation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
The compulsivity that is brought on by this instant gratification, texting 70 people, at a time, does that manifest itself in other areas beyond just relationships? And if so, could you speak to that?
Yeah, it absolutely does. In fact, there's some great research lately about just the effects of cell phones and the internet in general. People who, for example, or they'll go to bed and they will look at their cell phone for the last hour before they kind of fall asleep. And those people are experiencing a lot of sleep disturbance. They wake up 15 minutes later after they finally put the phone down, and their brain is craving more of that stimulus. And so it creates this digital invasion, creates a lot of sleep disturbance. It creates the difficulty emotionally regulating. It's difficult. We get irritable easier if there's not enough stimulation. Kids struggle now to read books because their ability to focus and pay attention, there's not any stimulus on a black and white page.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's very difficult for them to pay attention. So teachers have to adjust to be more stimulating and more proactive. And we're really losing, and all of these issues come down to this sense of desensitization. We're desensitizing our nervous system more so than just our brain, right, into needing more and more stimulus.
I get asked as a cop a lot, especially when I was working in the schools. You know, parents are saying, you know, my kid is sending naked selfies, right, the nudies, and is that wrong? Is it bad? Is it normal developmentally? What's the consensus? And kids are saying everybody's doing it. I don't see what the big deal is, but certainly that has to come into play here somewhere.
Well, sure. That's kind of the social media lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right. Can I get a nude pic? Can I give a nude pic? You know, the first thing I say to we can talk about the neurologic damage and all of that, but initially you got to know that if you send a nude image to a minor in Arizona, you've broken the law.
Right.
And all you have to have is an angry parent on the other end who wants to press charges, and they will.
Right.
Right. And so you have to be really careful. They don't care that you're a minor as well.
Right.
And so you have to be really
I've
clear.
dealt with that as from the legal side
Right.
all the time. Yeah.
Right.
That's an epidemic. You know, when
Right.
it first started back in 2004, 2005, I was shocked that I had 5 little girls a year come into my office that first year, and they were in tears because they felt they'd been betrayed
Right.
after they'd sent out this nudie. And now I told that to a school resource officer a couple of years ago, and he laughed at me. He said, "I get 5 a month."
Right.
You know, it's
Oh, yeah.
constant.
Absolutely. It's such a lifestyle. It's a social media lifestyle that we have to be very, very, very careful about. And that continues, you know, outside of the sexuality, it continues to degrade the ability to have and build a relationship, because relationships build slowly.
Yeah.
And those initial highly sexual, highly objectified initiations of relationships are really counterproductive to long-term happiness.
Yeah. So again, there's this perception that saying sending nudies is bad is a moralistic thing, but it's really not a moralistic thing. There's clinical evidence probably that shows this is detrimental to future relationships. It's detrimental to your ability to, you know, again, that delayed gratification. And I'm just making stuff up. I'm curious about the professionals' perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely, that's true. I mean, think about an insecure boy or girl who thinks they won't be accepted unless they send a nude image. Then they've deduced their self-esteem to body image, and it's not just bad on the relationship; it's bad for an individual. For sure.
I know our time is, we told you we'd get you out of here at 5:30.
I'm okay.
You're okay?
Yeah, we can go maybe 5:45.
What advice would you give to a teenager who's struggling with anxiety or depression in relation to social media and cell phones?
Well, that's a great question. There was a new research came out just this year that said in the last 10 years, anxiety and depression has doubled in adolescent children. So what's the big change in the last 15 years is digital. And so when kids come in and say, I have anxiety and depression, my first is to assess for how much screen time do they get, how much face-to-face time do they get with anybody, and to try to make some determinations, because these days that's an obvious go-to, and it's the hardest thing. And I tell kids, well, if we can't manage screen time, we're not going to have a lot of success, because if they spend all of their time there, that they can't emotionally regulate. They need human beings.
Do kids believe you when you tell them your anxiety and depression is directly correlated to your screen time?
I don't think they are thinking about whether they believe me or not. They're upset that I've said it in front of their parents. And they're feeling immediate withdrawal. They're feeling this immediate sense. And the indignation reveals, they get indignant about it, reveals their dependency on it,
Yeah.
right? And so,
Because they recognize there's going to be a loss.
yeah, and some kids do, and some kids, it's become self-evident in their life that that's an issue, especially your teenage boys and how much time they're spending in video games. Philip Zimbardo, I mentioned earlier, he says that your average 20-year-old boy has spent 10,000 hours playing video games. That's 2 master's degrees.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's good research, and it comes out of his book called The Demise of Guys. It talks about what's happened to men and boys.
Yeah, it makes me think of the book, The Tipping Point. It says you
Yeah.
have to have 10,000 hours of anything to be an expert in it.
Exactly.
Well, they're
They're
expert at
experts.
being isolated and depressed,
What I think-
overstimulated.
What I think is hilarious is you ask these guys what they want to do for a living. They say, "Well, I want to be a video
pro
game
gamer."
designer." Right.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, they're experts. They know exactly what good ones look like and bad ones don't, probably.
Yeah.
So, it's difficult because if we vilify video games,
Right.
that's not going to be super productive. But
Right.
it's really about the amount of time and the desensitization that's put there. And it's a real burden on parents. I think parents initially will do those things because their kids want them. They feel like they're being good parents. I know I've certainly done that.
Yeah.
And
They make great babysitters.
they really do. I'll tell you, back in about 2007, my son wanted this game, Call of Duty. Everybody's familiar with that game. And I remember we bought it for Christmas, right? And he played, I played with him, and we're about a week in. I had the whole week off of work, and I sent him to bed, and I played all night long.
Yeah, right.
And
Easy to do.
the next morning, I gave that game to my wife. I said, "Do not let him play that game any time." And over the years, we got smart, right?
Yeah.
I was getting more educated in my work, and we finally said, "Okay, you can play that game. You can only play with friends, never alone." And so what that eventually became was a Friday night with 3 other guys and some girls, and they hang out and have pizza, and they're playing the game, and they're yelling and screaming and having a time.
there
It became a
was
social event.
Social things, yeah.
Right? But that isolated play, that singular play, that always-on relationship, because nowadays they play video games and they've got a headphone on and they're talking to 20 strangers
Yeah.
who live in London or
Wherever.
Iowa.
Yeah.
Right? The amount of stimulation is profound.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't play video games because I know my propensity to get sucked in.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
the rest of the world would go away, and my family would starve. And
I'm in the same place.
Yeah.
I totally agree. I see it. It's so appealing to men.
Yeah.
I mean, I know girls play video games too. I'm not.
Visual, spatial,
But
mechanical,
the
men.
conquering and
Yeah.
the adventure,
Yeah.
it's so alluring. We
It
love
is.
that stuff.
Yeah. It's
Right
great.
side of the brain, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Dan, thank you. This has been great.
My pleasure.
Jerry, did you have one more question?
Good.
You're good. Okay. Okay. Well, we've kept you longer than we said we would, so thank you.
Thanks.